Welcome back to Heartwood Abyss. Today I'll be building a dwarven gate fortress deep within a massive cave system, where a final stand is being made against an endless insect swarm. And as always, I'll leave a link to the models I used down in the description below. To start things off, I began cutting up some styrofoam to build the basic shape of the diorama. I wanted the whole scene to sit at a slight angle just to make the final composition feel a bit more dynamic. By stacking different layers of foam together, I could start building up the various platforms and height differences for the fortress itself, while also planning out where the battlements and bridge would eventually go. After that, it was time to start working on the bridge crossing the cavern. I first built supportive pillars underneath the bridge, before adding a few simple arches connecting everything into the cavern walls to make the structure feel a bit more supported. Once it was finished, I started adding some plaster bricks along the edges to give the fortress more of a handcrafted dwarven look instead of just plain foam shapes. Then finally, I glued the bridge platform into the place across the cavern. With the bridge finished, I moved on to adding the battlements running along the edges of different platforms. For this, I first added a small wall around the sides before gluing on angled pieces on top. I also carved a tunnel directly into the foam leading towards the lower platform, to help sell the idea that this fortress was built directly into the cavern itself. And finally, I added a staircase leading up to the small upper platform overlooking the bridge. Then it was finally time to start working on the rocks. I first poured some plaster into a woodland scenics rock mold, and while those were drying, I covered all the exposed foam with a watered down mix of PVA glue and black paint to give everything a much harder outer layer. Once the plaster rocks had dried, I glued them into place around the cavern walls. I originally tried using some fast drying PVA glue for this, but after about 1 minute of waiting, I immediately switched over to hot glue instead. When the rocks were in place, I mixed together some plaster and PVA glue and started spreading it across the remaining foam surfaces to build up some larger rock shapes and blend everything together. Then, once the plaster had partially dried, I used a sculpting spatula to carve in all the final rock texture and details. And with the basic structure finally finished, it was time to start bringing the fortress to life. Especially once the massive insect horde started coming together around the bridge. The whole scene really began to feel like a desperate final defense. So with the fortress complete, let me tell you the story behind the first gate.
The world above was dying. Every month more refugees fled towards the mountains seeking shelter beneath the earth. Entire kingdoms had already been consumed by the swarm. Villages vanished overnight. Forests became hollow breeding grounds, filled with chittering sounds and endless movements beneath the trees. The only safe place left was Heartwood, an ancient dwarven kingdom hidden deep beneath the mountains. There was only one known entrance into the underground realm. A colossal cave opening, large enough for entire caravans to pass through. Just beyond the entrance, the dwarves had carved an enormous defensive wall directly into the stone itself. Towers rose from the cavern rocks, overlooking the approach, while deeper inside the mountain, tunnels and bridges connected the lower caverns, leading towards the heart of the kingdom. The first gate was one of the earliest chokeholds beyond the entrance. A narrow stone bridge crossing a deep abyss within the caverns. Normally it was little more than a guarded passage. Tonight it became a battlefield. A convoy of over 200 refugees had entered the cave system under the escort of 30 guards. They had almost reached the first gate when the sound began echoing from the entrance far behind them. Buzzing, at first distant, and louder. Then the screaming started. The swarm had found the mountain. The insects flooded to the cave entrance in impossible numbers, pouring around the outer wall before the defenders could fully seal the passage. Some climbed directly across the cavern walls, while others forced their way through breaches and unfinished barricades near the entrance tunnels. Panic spread instantly to the refugees. The escort turned back to buy time, fighting desperately in the outer caverns, while the civilians ran deeper into the mountains towards the first gate. Then the screaming stopped. The clash of steel vanished, the buzzing faded. Silence filled the caverns. For several long moments nothing moved beyond the darkness of the tunnels. No survivors emerged. No wounded cries echoed to the stone, only silence. The defenders at the first gate stared into the blackness beyond the bridge, waiting. Then came footsteps. Two figures stumbled out of the darkness, the last surviving guards. The armor was torn apart, shields missing, weapons drenched in black blood. One could barely walk, while the other half dragged him towards the bridge. Behind them, deep within the tunnels, something moved in the dark stone corridors. Not charging, not screaming, crawling. The guards crossed the bridge just as the first shapes began emerging from the shadows behind them. Hundreds of glistening eyes, reflecting the firelight. The swarm had gone.